If you like my dad's videos, please subscribe to QA Insights channel.
Okay, let us get started. Thank you, folks, for joining this week's session. Last 2 weeks, I was busy in my project work and deliverables, so I couldn't set up any session for the last 2 weeks. So now I am back. So today we are going to discuss about how you can get started with contributing to open source. So before we get started, I would like to give a few words about the this week's sponsor. So please check it out, redline13.com. So if you are running high-scale load testing using JMeter, Redline 13 will give you very affordable pricing for your high-scale load testing. So without further ado, let us get started how you can get started contributing to open source. So before we see about open source contribution, first we have to understand about the two variants of the software, right? One is open source software, and then we have free software. So we have to understand the difference between these two, which will help us to get some more clarity about how you can start contributing and understanding the open source ecosystem. So before open source, there's a term called free software, right? So Free Software Foundation. So this Free Software Foundation emerged in 1980s. So mainly the objective is to distribute the software without having any restrictions. So here the word free, it doesn't relate to any pricing or cost. It is about freedom. So you'll have a complete freedom to deploy the software, whatever the use case you have in your premise. And then you can study how the software is working, and you can modify if you have any needs. And then you can redistribute this software without any strings attached. And also you can enhance the software. You can release it to the community at no cost or free of cost. So these are some of the terms of Free Software Foundation. There are four pillars. And then in 1990s, the term open source emerged. So open source, again, both Free Software Foundation and Open Source Foundation talks about the same thing, but it slightly varies when it comes to, if you see deep dive into the philosophies, it will vary. But both the terms, both the Free Software Foundation and Open Source Foundation talks about free software. Okay, so here again, the word free is not about money; it is about freedom you have. So everybody, right? Even today, everybody uses at least one open source software. For example, a better example is Firefox. So Firefox is the open source software, and free software means you can think about the Linux kernel. So that is free software. So there is a difference between these two, but at the end, mainly you will have that no cost related to the software and its usage. But when it comes to open source, you should be very careful, because open source software has license attached to it. So whenever you go to GitHub project, if you go to any project, including mine, or as you can go to JMeter or anything, so in the right side you can see there is a license attached for any piece of software in Bitbucket or GitHub. So you need to always refer the licensing model of the software and see whether you are not violating the terms. Just because it is available, the source code is available, doesn't mean that you can do whatever you want. So you need to go through that license to understand, and based on that, you need to you can modify or you can distribute. So there are two extremes. One is the permissive. So permissive means it will give some lot of freedom, and there is another end called copyleft, which will have some restrictions. So you need to check the license terms before you start using the software. So since we are in performance testing and engineering field, so we use many open source software, right? JMeter, K6 OSS, and then Locust, DDoSify, new tool, and then there are a lot of other tools also available. And also we use proprietary frameworks like LoadRunner, NeoLoad, and Eggplant. So these are again proprietary. So proprietary you already know, you cannot modify, you cannot see how it works. So everything is a closed ecosystem. Basically, you cannot do anything unless they provide a framework to add your features. For example, if you take K6, so K6 again you can contribute. You can create some plugins. Again, if you load runner, again they don't have that ecosystem where you can create your own plugins. So you have to understand the licensing model, the business, then only you can start modifying and recreating it. Okay, now let us talk about open source contribution. So that is the main topic. So like any of us, even when I started using JMeter, I was overwhelmed because of the ecosystem. Because we do not know how we can contribute. Even if you like to contribute, we reach nowhere basically because everything happens via email. Even still today, Apache Foundation, everything will happen email. But only if you take CNCF, they have community meetups. So everything happens only in email, and it takes time to get to know about the ecosystem. And it is sometimes you may think, okay, whether I am welcomed to the community or not, or somebody might be the response might be rude, it will not be welcomed, right? So all sort of questions you will have. So this session will help us to help you to get started contributing more to the open source, not just JMeter. In general, I'm talking. So whenever you use your any software, it could be open source or it could be licensed. Sometimes you run into some issues, and most of us we try to fix it. We try to debug, and what we do, if it is possible, yes. Otherwise, in the licensed ecosystem, what we do, we raise a support ticket, and then support guys will take over, and then they will try to fix it. But in terms of open source software, if we come across some issue, what we do is we just put it as some kind of a risk or it cannot be done, and then we just move forward. So that is our most of us. That's the mindset we have, including me. But few people, what they do, they try to contribute more by changing the code or contributing to some documentation or reporting this defect to the community. So whatever you do, right? So whatever you, even if you just add a small screenshot to the documentation, that is comes under contribution. So it's not really you need to write code or you need really not to develop something to contribute to the open source projects. So you can simply even grammatically correct some documents, even if you simply add the images to the documentation, or if you raise a bug and it get it fixed, that is also a contribution. Okay, so JMeter, Locust, and K6. So these are commonly used open source tools. And among the three, I mean, JMeter is very 20 plus years in open source field. And again, Locust, it's there for many years. Again, K6 also is there for many years. So if you are using any of these open source tools, what you can do is you can go to the respective website, and there you can see definitely there should be a column like how to contribute. So every open source project will have this contributing README file. So if you go to this particular file and if you just read at a glance, you will understand how you can get started with the contribution. So everybody has a GitHub account, right? So what usually I do whenever I stumble upon some project I like, I usually start that particular repository, and also I will fork it. So forking means you are taking a copy of the whole source code and then you are keeping it in your profile, and you can just clone that and then you can modify and you can keep it for your purpose. And if you like to contribute, you can submit a pull request. So this is how a very high level process of contributing to the open source. So it could be anything. Say last week I contributed just one screenshot to JMeter. I mean, officially that is my first contribution, but before that I already reported defects, and then I have some upgrades with respect to Groovy I have contributed. That is yet to release, and not just open source, even LoadRunner also I contributed a lot. LoadRunner, NeoLoad. So directly I ping the engineer or the product owner, and then I just give the feedback. So that is also a contribution. So it doesn't mean only if your name comes to the say who are contributors list. That it doesn't not that adding the name doesn't matter. Only if you still contribute a small thing, that matters to the open source community or any software. Okay. So now I will talk about how you can find, okay, what things I can contribute, right? So that is main thing. It will come to your mind. How can I contribute and what can I contribute? So what you can do is you can just go to any repo, whichever you want to contribute, and go to the issues tab. So in the issues tab, you can see a lot of issues will be there. Mostly it could be like priority bugs, or it could be like a small trivial bugs. So you can take whichever you like, whichever is easy for you. You can start with that, and then you can go to the code. So before you go to the code, you have to understand the how the framework is organized. If you take JMeter, it's very complex ecosystem. It is not like you can day one itself you can do something on JMeter or K6 or a locust. So everything is very complex ecosystem. You have to play around a little bit. It will take weeks or it could take months. Once you play around this ecosystem or framework, then only you can do some small modifications, or you can do some kind of tweaking based on your needs. So what you can do first, what I did, I always raise a bug. That is how I get started. If you want to contribute to any project, yeah, I start using that that product. Then I will definitely, I might, you can find a lot of issues actually in open source. And I raise a defect to the community. Then I will interact with the development team, and then I will try to test it again, and then I will try to close that. Then you'll get some idea. Okay, this is how the community works. This is the community vibrant and heartbeat. So those things you can learn. Then you can start contributing to the documentation. So documentation, again, it will be lack of documentation, or the screenshots might be outdated, or the versions might be outdated. Definitely you can find a lot of issues. Even today in JMeter or in K6, you can find a lot of issues, lot of conflicts in all the folders or whatever the component you are working. Then you can start contributing to the documentation. Then you can learn about which language the software is built, then learn that language, then you can start slowly. So this is how you step by step you can go. And many community, they will definitely help you out. For example, if you take JMeter, so there are certain core developers are there, they will definitely respond to your questions, because every community has a dev mailing list. So you can join to that dev mailing list, but you will get a lot of emails. And if you send a question to the dev community, they will respond it back with the response. I mean, the answers if they have. Otherwise, you need to do some more research. So by joining the dev community, you will get a lot of insights about the product and what is the upcoming features and enhancements, or what is the known issue. So you can just learn that before you start contributing. So whenever I go to some K6 or Locust, I always join to the dev community to see what's going on. So this is another way you can get started. So now let me stop here. If you have any questions, please raise your hand. So Jacob is saying yes, major open source project have well described community. Yes. So every repo, if you see, there's a detailed documentation will be there. But only thing is people don't read it. But I suggest you to read at least once to understand about the contributing guidelines about the project. Thanks, Jacob, for your comment. So any questions, guys, here? Hey, Sid, thanks for joining.
Hey Naveen. So thanks for explaining everything. And so I have a question here, saying that when the term open source, like you mentioned, there would be a licensed version and a freeware.
Correct.
Like Unix, let's take Unix. So Unix has a kernel. Anybody can use that source code and they can add their additions.
Yes.
And Unix has always supporting enterprise editions. So which means
Correct.
they support. I don't think that feature is available in JMeter, right? JMeter, we don't have any enterprise version, right?
No, JMeter software as such we don't have, but BlazeMeter, if you take, they took the core of JMeter, they implemented on the cloud.
Okay.
So
Okay.
that is again that is permissible as per the license. And
So,
similarly, if you take Flood.io or Octoperf, so there are a lot of JMeter on cloud vendors are there, but their core is JMeter. But they will have their own framework on top of it. Then they are selling it to the uh, users.
so that means there is no more support directly from like enterprise versions. If we have any problem in JMeter, they come and
Yeah, you have to raise a support ticket. Yes,
do we have that in JMeter?
for I mean, sorry,
And
JMeter
enterprise version, like enterprise support
for JMeter or for
is for
BlazeMeter?
JMeter. JMeter, I'm asking.
No, JMeter, no.
Yeah.
Community, JMeter community, I mean, Apache Software Foundation, they don't release like a commercial version. They just release only open source version.
So that means they only take the consideration and whatever the suggestion we say. That's
Correct. Yeah, community, it goes with the community, however the community feels, we develop.
and yeah. Recently, you have developed a like a add-on for JMeter, right? So
Plugin, yes.
yeah, plugin. Yeah. So what is the process they consider to take as the official version? I mean, officially
Official
we can
version,
add to
yes.
source
If you
code.
take Ubic in general, there is a company, right? Ubic, UBIK. So they
Okay.
develop plugins, commercial plugins for JMeter.
Oh, yeah,
So
that is the catch. Yeah.
as per the licensing, they are not breaking any licensing because they are using that free. They are basically keeping it as it is. Then on the top of it, they are making the commercial plugins because it's a real, I think, video streaming, some other things they have developed. It's a commercial.
And and most of the open source. So if you find out any bugs, they pay you back, right? Uh,
Yes.
okay. Okay. Yeah, that's all, Naveen. I thought of asking. Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I mean, but they can take some donation. Donation is not imposed, but all these foundations, right? They take donation. So the open source, the corporate love open source because they can develop whatever they want, and then they just add some other, I mean, commercial ingredients, and then they can sell it. Like if example is a K6. So K6 we have that engine, right? K6 engine that is open source. But if you want to use something like distributed load testing from different regions, then they have the cloud version. So the cloud version is for mostly for enterprise and additional features like dashboarding and no need to maintain your own infrastructure. So those things will be added on top of the OSS flavor. So that is commercial, but the core engine is free. You can just fork it and then you can use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah. So
Grafana also again, same thing for Grafana. So Grafana again opens that is the core is free, but if you want commercial grade, then you need to pay.
yeah, thanks. That's what I thought of bringing in here in the topic. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the main difference between open source and free. I mean, free software. That's what free means. Freedom. You have complete freedom. Uh, it doesn't. They don't have any sort of restrictions. Freely distribute. If you want to put a tag, you can put a tag on it. But if you don't want, you can. There's no need to put a price tag. But open source comes under the licensing. Mainly, you have to see the license. If you are violating the license, then yeah, they might file the lawsuit.
So have you? I mean, give back that you the development of yours. You attach with the main source code, or you just only
Yes,
give the.
again
Okay.
depends on the license actually.
Okay.
Like some of the license is more permissive, as I said, right? You have some sort of freedom you have with respect to source code. But if you have a lot of restrictions will be there in few licenses. I am not a licensing expert, but there is a application where it will suggest you based on your answers. It will suggest you which license you can go. So there is an app for that in online application. So based on that, you can select the license like MIT, Apache, and then we have different. If you go to GitHub, right, it will display different options, and then you can choose your licensing terms.
Okay.
And also you can
Yeah.
change the licensing terms. So that is also allowed. Say right now I am using Apache for my project and tomorrow I want to change it to MIT license, then yes, you can do that. But you have to put a note, okay, if we are changing from this license to license. I think Grafana or some, recently I saw some testing tool, they changed the licensing.
Yeah. Thanks, Naveen.
Yeah. So any questions, guys? Hi, Eldad. Thanks for joining.
Hey, great to be here. How you doing, Naveen?
I'm good. Thank you. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Driving. That's it. But
It's
one
okay.
thing
You
that
can
you
talk later.
no, that's okay. It's a boring kind of drive. Nothing out of the ordinary. But one thing that you also have to take into account is your own organization. Okay, so you have the open source community and the particular open source project that you want to either integrate or work with or fork or contribute to. You also have to take into account the policies of the organization you currently work in, and maybe sometimes they will not be very approval of this, or maybe even frown upon this. So you better check at your local legal department or something like that before you go into contributing. That's something you really have to get out of the way.
Yes, that's a good point, Eldad. Yes, yeah. Every organization, yeah, they have their its own open source advocates, right? So they will tell you whether whatever you have developed for you or for your organization, it can be open sourced or not. So you need to go through some approval process before you release it to the public. Otherwise, yeah, you will have to face the consequences within your organization. But Google, Google or Facebook or any company, even consulting companies, every company has their own set of framework, whether this software can be open sourced or not. So I think there is some. If you go to some opensource.com, right? Or sorry, open source, right? I forgot the website name. If you just Google open source, there is a good website is there. I mean, what is the open source philosophy? So if you read it, you will get to more insights about open source.
Yeah, it is opensource.com. It's an awesome
.com.
website. I read a lot of it. Yeah, they have good
Yeah.
materials there.
Yes.
Um, Yeah, well, I think it really depends on the field that you work in. Of course, companies like Facebook or Google and Microsoft who already have this very sound open source culture. It might be easier for you to get into open source projects, even from within the company that you work in. But if, on the other hand, maybe you work for a financial institution or government, or you work in the pharmaceutical industry, it might be a little bit more difficult. They're a little bit more cautious when it comes to sharing information, or they're different. It's different dynamics there. So yeah, it does depend on what kind of company you work for.
Correct, correct. That's correct. And I mean, recently, if you take Kubernetes, right? So Kubernetes, Google's, they donated to the CNCF Foundation. On top of Kubernetes, there are at least, I have seen some 300 plus companies are there in Silicon Valley itself, just only for Kubernetes. So every Kubernetes storage, Kubernetes networking, each and every layer, if you split within Kubernetes, we have a company only dedicated for that Kubernetes management, Kubernetes automation, Kubernetes deployment. So each and everything we have a company. So everybody is a commercial company, but they are using that Kubernetes from the open source. They are tweaking the product and then they are selling it on top of it. So this is one recent example I can think of for the open source. So CNCF landscape is very huge, like just like Apache. It's very huge. If you have a project within CNCF, it is going matured within CNCF, right? You will get to know more limelight and somebody will acquire pretty soon. So we have some idea. For example, Litmus Chaos. So we had a guest, right? I think 2 to 3 months ago, Karthik from Litmus Chaos. So Litmus Chaos started as an open source project, and then it got incubated in CNCF recently. I think 2 months ago, I also voted uh, for it, and then last 2 weeks ago, Harness acquired Litmus Chaos. So Harness is the company which was founded by AppDynamics founder Jody Bansal. So he started Harness to few years ago, and the Harness acquired Litmus Chaos. So you get a lot of visibility when you contribute to the foundation, and then it got incubated to the matured condition. Then definitely you'll get a more limelight. Okay. So any questions, guys?
I think Jacob put another comment.
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, JMeter is Apache licensed. Yes. The consulting companies you can contact if you really want to pay. Yes. Yeah, there are a lot of consulting companies. So even I offer paid support for JMeter. So in my weekends. So sometimes I get some consulting gigs for JMeter. Yeah.
But you also need to take into account, yeah, maybe the core JMeter project is Apache, but it might well be that one of the plugins that you use are developed by someone else, and they have different license guidelines. So you need to take them into account too. For example, in Locust, it's the same case. Locust, I think it is MIT licensed, the
Mhm.
original Locust, but
Yes.
there is a Locust plugin project, and currently maybe it is also MIT, but it could change. I mean, it could easily become Apache or something else. So you need to be aware of the plugins they use, not just the core project.
Correct. That's correct. Yeah. Similarly, BlazeMeter also held that. So BlazeMeter again, if you go to GitHub repository, you can see the licensing for BlazeMeter. So that comes under Apache 2.0 license. Yeah, you have to always watch out for the licensing, whether you are not breaking anything.
Yeah, but it could easily change now. They have been acquired by Perfecto, I think, or it's by, I don't remember which. No, Paraforce. I'm sorry, Paraforce acquired the BlazeMeter, so it could
Correct.
be changed again. No, nobody knows.
Yes. Apache is kind of it's has limitation and options. Probably use Apache those who use it can and suppose findings are the uh, uh, you can Apache your text and distribute. You cannot take I'm going to read the JDA because it's already trademarked to Apache Software Foundation. And if you want to use a feather icon for your product, then you cannot use it. And warranty, again, open source doesn't give any warranty. So say, for example, because of Log4j, right? For example, Log4j caused a lot of issues. And you cannot file a lawsuit because the license is they doesn't provide any kind of warranty, whatever, if, for example, software loss or network attacks, right? That is why open source comes with its own caveats.
Yeah, it's true, and you need to be careful and use the proper tools like White Source or SonarBlend or SonarQ, sorry, and stuff like that. It can help you with these type of problems.
Correct, correct. Yes. So Sai is asking, can you talk some of the open source APM tools? So there is one APM tool called Skywalker. I don't know how many of you heard about this or use it. So it is from Apache Software Foundation. You can just Google Skywalker. So Skywalker is the complete observability tool. So you can just like Dynatrace or New Relic. So you can just check it out, Skywalker, and then you can deploy on your in your environment. So Skywalker is the answer for APM. Okay, can you describe mostly used? I'm not an expert, Jacob, in licensing. All I know the terms only. MIT, GPL, Apache, right? But that's what there's a website called. Let me just Google. So find licensing. I'm just Googling. One moment. Yeah, there is a website called choosealicense.com. Okay. So if you go to choosealicense.com, it will ask you a set of questions. For example, I need to work in a community or not. Uh, do you want to keep it as a simple and permissive, or I care about sharing improvements? So these are some of the questions you can find it in this website, and based on that, it will provide you which license you can go. For example, MIT. So MIT is short. It is very it balances both, and the GNU GPL v3 we have. So Ansible and all it comes under GNU GPL v3. And if you want to know, if you want to give more choices, there are of course there are different types of licenses are available. So mainly look for the permissions, conditions, and limitations. So if you go to limitations, almost any license if you choose, there will be liability and warranty. So they don't provide any warranty or liability, but there will be some conditions like a distribution and then licensing. So those things will be there. So you have to look out for the permissions and conditions. Okay. Is my voice breaking right now? No.
No, it was in between, Naveen.
Okay. 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 Another example is the Linux, right? So Linux, Red Hat, they have their own flavor, right? Red Hat Linux, and then they forked that project. They created CentOS, right? So they kept the same, the base balance, the license is same, but we have the equivalent of Red Hat commercial Linux operating system as a CentOS. So if you want to use CentOS, you can use the CentOS. So this is another example I can think of. Again, one cloud to next cloud, that is another example. And then yeah, Chromium, right? So Chromium is open source, right? And then Microsoft forked that, they created Edge. And then Vivaldi, they created Vivaldi from Chromium, and Opera, and then Brave, right? See, so many forks are there, right? So they are making sure they are not violating any licensing, but they can fork it, they can create, they can put all their features on it. So this is a best example I can think of right now for licensing. So similarly, I think there is a for JMeter also I come across one tool called XMeter. So XMeter is it's a fork of JMeter, but it has its own flavors. I don't know whether it is still there or not, but I come across that XMeter a few years ago. But again, if you want to use it, you can use it. Even I can create something like a Q meter or N meter, something like that, and then I can put my own thing, right? So depends on how you want to use the software. And Firefox, again, Firefox is open source, so there is a WaterFox, right? So again, that's another browser. So like this, if you have a use case, definitely you can fork it, you can tweak, you can just tamper it, and you can create your own software out of it. Sometimes it may become a hit. Sometimes it will be only for personal use. So if you want to keep using for personal, yeah, you can deploy on your own premise.
Naveen, so if you on top of an open source code, if you develop any features, and does it means like Opera, some Chromium, so you can do your own licensing for that? That means you can
Yes.
sell it.
Yeah, that's what it depends on the base license. If the base
Oh,
license allows you to change the license, you can do that.
well, that means you can own it and then sell as a product.
Yes, yes. That's what
Oh.
the Apache allows commercial that permissions. So you can put a price tag on it.
So how about any even Java is open source, right? Any ideas over there? Eldad has not.
No, see, Java is again it's a complex ecosystem since Oracle, right? So Oracle they have their own Oracle JDK, but since they want to contribute, they created the Open JDK, right? And OpenJDK, it's completely open source. You can do whatever you want. You can create your own flavor. That is why Amazon has created their own flavor. Microsoft has created their own flavor. So everybody has their own flavor out of OpenJDK. But Oracle JDK, nobody can because Oracle is Oracle proprietary. You cannot do that. If you want to use it for commercial, you need to get the license.
So for Apache JMeter, do they develop with the Java code or any Groovy kind of stuff? I
It's
hope it's not
Java only. No,
Java,
right now it's
right? Yeah.
Java. They are
Yeah.
implementing Kotlin also. Right now, 5.5 it's set to release. 5.5 has a Kotlin flavor for few components, but mostly it is Java,
Yeah, yeah.
99%.
Thanks, Navin. Yeah.
Groovy is basically like it's Java, but it's interpreted. That's the difference.
Correct,
Real
correct.
Java gets kind of compiled before running, and it's kind of powerful because then the Java code gets optimized. It gets JITted. It gets this just-in-time compilation for better performance. Groovy does have the similar thing, but it's more interpreted. So it's kind of top to bottom, left to right kind of thing, like Python. Very similar to Python.
Yes, yeah, like a Python. Yes, yeah. You don't need to define a variable type, or you don't need to put some semicolons at the end. No brackets is required, so you can do
Yeah,
whatever
it
you
makes
want, like in Python.
Yeah, well, Python always comes with a trade-off. You trade performance. You don't need the
Performance.
top-level performance. You trade that in favor of more clarity and more readable code and code that is easier to run. And now it's just how well it fits to your case, to your needs. More specifically in Python, if you take a look at the C Python implementation, which is the most common one, the C Python implementation is also open source. You can contribute to it. You can fork it. You can use it for your own needs. It's okay. Contributing is more complex. You need to submit a PEP, a Python enhancement proposal, and after it gets approved by the benign dictator for life, Guido van Rosen, only then you can actually contribute the actual code changes to this. So it's kind of different.
Yeah. Speaking of which, I have another question to you both, and Eldad or Navin, anybody, Jacob. So, do you people heard or anything like suggesting the source code for the open source for performance wise? Since we are the performance testers, right? So earlier, uh, when the initial stages of the JMeter, everybody used to say for comparing the commercial tools, JMeter itself has a performance defect. So any suggestions to improve the source code in performance wise? You people heard or aware of?
I'm not sure I understand the question. You mean how
Yes.
to improve performance of open source projects? Is that the
Yes,
question?
Eldad, because earlier initial release of Apache JMeter, right? So when we were comparing the JMeter with the commercial tool like Loadrunner, so always there was pros and cons, right? In the cons, we have JMeter is a itself has a performance lacking tool. That's what we used to heard. So
Well, I think it's a little bit complex because it's performance engineering for all intents and purposes. How do you do in performance engineering that? Well, in open source is as applied as commercial tools. It's the same thing.
yep, yep,
Every tool has its own cons, right? So, Sudarshan. So if you take a JMeter, it's purely Java, right? So JVM is a bottleneck, right?
yeah,
And if you take a load
Yeah.
runner, again, load generator is a bottleneck, right? So every tool has its own bottleneck. So I don't see any performance issues with respect because I have put millions of load in JMeter. I never seen any bottleneck. Only thing is the way you did might be wrong, or it can be improved. But I never seen performance issues as such in JMeter.
yeah. So that means shall we conclude like any open source core is like a perfect performance
No,
evaluator,
we
right?
cannot say that also. No, again, no,
That was the
no,
question for
No.
me. So
no,
can you
no, no, no.
suggest any performance suggestions for the core of any open sources?
No, it depends on your
Um,
requirements. What does mean performance is?
Okay,
Well, it
okay,
it 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 also means it goes to the question of what does it mean to contribute to an open source project. It could be either actual coding. Okay, so you could actually code. You could be an IDs contributor. In some projects, this would apply. You are contributing to the IDs. You just bring up IDs to the project, and you can also be a bug finder. There's also this kind of contributor. So you could easily contribute your time as a performance engineer to the open source project. That's perfectly applied.
Yeah, thanks, Elder. That clears my question.
Yeah, definitely you can contribute to improve the performance, Sid. That is also there.
Yeah, but
Actually,
most of
there's a
them.
really hold on, I think there is a really neat case or case study. There is a awesome guy. His name is Anthony. I don't remember what his last name is. His name is Anthony. He has a great YouTube channel and is an awesome contributor to several projects in Python, including Black, the Python auto formatter, and also PyTest. And he found a massive bottleneck in the Black repo, and he actually did profiling. So he profiled the code, and then he found the bottleneck, and he fixed it and pull requested. And he posted a really nice case study on YouTube as to how he did this. So here's an example. You could easily take this project, either you clone it to your own local repo, you compile it or whatever needed, you profile it, and now you can find bottlenecks and you can offer the other core developers how to fix it. So it could perfectly apply.
Yes. So even for JMeter, right, Eldad or Sid, so even today, 5.5 asked it to release, right? So actually it was scheduled to release 3 weeks ago, 5.5. I mentioned in my last Clubhouse, but we couldn't release it because there is a critical defect is still open. That is why we are not releasing that 5.5. So the issue is when you run your thread group, if you go to view results tree and click on that any of the sampler you executed, any request, and if you go to response, right, it will take 10 to 15 seconds to load the response. So it's a regression defect. It's still open in certain versions of Java, certain versions of JMeter. So that is why community is not released. They're still analyzing. Even I tried, I couldn't spend time much on it. But if you have time and if you have that skill, you can fix that issue, and it will be released soon once it is fixed.
But you people might have heard this may be irrelevant to this topic, but I heard in the news like people find the bugs in Google, Facebook, and they're getting paid of huge money. So
Security bugs,
yeah,
yes.
yeah. So, but in this open source contribution, we don't have that facility, right?
No, it depends. If
Yeah.
somebody is sponsoring that project, right? Say GitHub sponsors, Google sponsors many projects, and if they really liked it, definitely they can give some rewards to you, or they can offer a job to in their company. So it depends on the severity and how it will be very useful to the community, like Log4j and all, right? Definitely, so who was identified, definitely he would have rewarded. Right? It found by Alibaba cloud engineer, right? So definitely Alibaba would have rewarded him a lot.
Yeah, thanks, Navin. Thanks. That
Yeah.
answered my questions. One last thing, like I would like to congratulate Eldad. His presentation and better coding got promoted. So where?
Yeah, he's a regular contributor.
Yeah, yeah. Congratulate Eldad. I thought of putting comment in LinkedIn, but I forgot it.
I think he is driving, might be. Yeah. Okay. So thank you, everyone. So please contribute, even if it is very small. I would like to go to the documentation. Please make some changes, review, and get it published. If you have any questions, you can ask me. So I know JMeter ecosystem. I know K6 ecosystem. So please let me know if you have any questions. Definitely, even if a small grammatical mistake, also if you found, please submit a pull request in the repository. Okay, that will helps a lot for the community. So next week we come up with some other topic, and then until then, yeah, thank you. Have a good weekend. Thank you, Eldad. Thank you, Sid. Thank you, Jacob, for your contribution. Bye.
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 If you like my dad's videos, please subscribe to QA Insights channel.